And so now we've come to the 9th day of the Novena. But you've not finished with me yet, because we still have the feast day tomorrow. And we'll still continue to reflect on the icon. But today, I'd like to take as our reflection the theme, Icon of Light. And for that, I would like, therefore, to draw on two details. The star that is to be found on Mary's brow or forehead, and the other is the right hand pointing to Jesus, our light. And to help us in this reflection, I'd like to read to you from the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 5. Immediately after the Beatitudes in verses 1 to 12, in the verse 13, Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth." And then verse 14 onwards, the light. Verse 14, "You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand. And it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." The Gospel of the Lord. My dear sisters and brothers in Jesus and Mary, the icon of light. And the details in the icon are meant to show us why. Just look at the 8-pointed star that is placed over the forehead of Mary, the Mother of God. You know, when Jesus was born, the wise men, the Magi, came from the east looking for him, and they were led by a star. It brought them up to Jerusalem. And then, consulting the scriptures, the star continued to lead them to Bethlehem, where they found the baby Jesus. In the icon, the 8-pointed star, you would say, it can be considered the Star of Bethlehem, guiding the wise men to Jesus. Today, you could say, like the star that led the wise men, Mary is the morning star who has guided many. Today, it is Mary who shows where Jesus is and guides us to him. The other detail is the right hand of Mary. Now, when I looked at the icon of prayer, I already spoke about the hands of Mary, the hands that protected him, supported him, guided him, and pointed him out to us. Today, I'd like to focus particularly on the right hand, because that is something very unique and special. This hand holds the hand of Jesus. It has her fingers pointing to her Son, I would say, as the way, the truth, and the life. And this very hand that points to Jesus, I would think it echoes the word of the Heavenly Father. And so now Jesus, as the mother, says, "This is my beloved Son." Or again, you would say, this hand that points to Jesus is also accompanied with words that were said to the stewards at Cana and said to you and me, "Do whatever he tells you." Not a request, but a command. Do whatever he tells you. St. Alphonsus Liguori, the founder of us Redemptorists, he says that the true devotee of Mary is never lost. Because a true devotee of Mary knows that the center of one's life is Jesus. And what she is doing in this icon, through the star and through the pointed hand, is pointing out Jesus as the light of the world, the light of our life. And it has two consequences. One is to acknowledge that in Jesus we experience His light. And it is this light which dispels the darkness that we experience. The second is this, that we are called to live this light, to give witness to Christ the light, the witness to Jesus our Redeemer. She points Jesus out to us in the icon, not only with her hands, but by the witness of her life. And she urges you and me to do the same. And as a witness, therefore, to Jesus, we proclaim Jesus is the light. Now, this is proclaimed beautifully through the baptism liturgy, which is full of symbols, each with wonderful meanings. There is the water, there is the oil, the chrism, there is the white garment, and of course, the candle. Because from the Easter candle that is lit, the candle for the baptized, the one to be baptized, is lit from that and handed over to the one to be baptized, or if an infant, to the parents and to the godparents. It's a simple gesture but very significant. Because what is this light coming down to us from the Easter candle saying? It says that this light comes from Christ through the apostles and the apostolic church, through the unbroken line from the time of the apostles. That is why we say in the I believe in the one holy Catholic and apostolic church. So today when you get some of these sects or these believers or Pentecostal groups that have begun only lately, they don't go back to the time of the apostles. It is not an apostolic church. So in handing over this candle lit from the Easter candle to the one to be baptized, to the parents and godparents, what is the church saying? The church is saying that despite the darkness around us, this light must be passed on. There will be attacks on the values of Jesus, which speak of equality and justice for the oppressed, but the light must shine on. There will be attacks from believers and sects like these with their limited and fractured understanding of Christianity. There would be persecution from religious fundamentalists and sometimes secular fundamentalists. There will be mockery from those who claim to have no time or place in their life for God. And sometimes there might be a tendency to feel shy of proclaiming oneself a disciple of Jesus because of pressure from your companions or because you want to be accepted by your group. My dear friends, darkness has many and different forms. It can come to us in different ways, especially in this time of the pandemic. And therefore, it makes for the yearning of light even stronger and deeper. So this darkness can take form in different ways, like, for example, the death of a dear family member or a friend. You're being deprived of physical closeness at the time of death and the inability to say goodbye or even have a proper funeral service. Now, there are other areas of darkness: loss of a job, loss of income, an unexpected rejection by a loved one, going through painful treatment of an illness, being misunderstood or even rejected by your very own. And sometimes this outward darkness leaves a greater gloom or darkness inside as well. We need the light. But plain light alone is useless, because bright light alone serves no purpose. Anyone going on a highway at night with the blinding light of the oncoming vehicles just blinds you. Despite the light, you can see nothing. Light makes itself useful, as Jesus indicates, not when it's kept under the bushel basket or under the bed. Light becomes useful when it enables us to see things beyond itself to the world around us. Light is useful when this light is thrown into the darkness and brightens it up. We are called to be the light, but the light of the world. And we should make a difference to the world around us. You know, when Jesus says, "You are the light of the world," mark those words. He does not say, "You will be, you could be, perhaps, or maybe." No, he says, "You are the light of the world." This is who you are. And this is how you are to live. As salt of the earth and light to the world. If we are not what we are called to be, then we are useless to give light. But it isn't my light or my glory. It's Jesus' light. It's Jesus' glory. Receive the light of Christ, we are told at our baptism. Be the light of Christ in the world. This is who you are, and this is how you are to live. So what does that mean to you and me? Salt and light are reminders that as Christians, we don't just say prayers or go to church only because we are going to church, but to make a difference because we go to church in the lives of people around us. The theme of light is found not only in the Gospel, but in the Old Testament as well. And so what I'm going to read to you is from the prophet Isaiah chapter 58. But I want to give you the background to that before. You know, people were taken from Jerusalem and taken away to captivity in Babylon. They lived there as exiles in the land, and in the meantime, Jerusalem was just almost destroyed, broken down, and then they come back. They come back and they begin to rebuild Jerusalem. They rebuild the temple. They are back to having religious services for which they had been deprived for such a long time. And so they once again could worship in their own land. They once again were able to perform their religious duties and practices. But the prophet reminds them that they must now live their lives in a new way, in a new key. Life could not be the same as before. So he warns them as to how they live their life and how they look at the religious celebrations and ceremonies. The people were saying, "We fast, Lord, and you don't even look at it, you don't even consider it." And in chapter 58 of Isaiah, he tells them, your religious ceremonies are important, but in the right context. So God is responding to that. I'm going to read from verse 6. Because they're grumbling, we are performing all our religious duties and you don't even consider them. And he says to them, "Is not this fast that I choose? To loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, bring the homeless and poor into your house, when you see the naked, to cover them, and not to hide yourself from your own kin?" Then it says, after all these words, "Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. Then you shall call," it continues, "and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help, and he will say, 'Here I am.'" In other words, the prophet Isaiah is linking our religious celebration to the way we live. That was important for him. Now he doesn't stop there. He goes on in verse 9. He says, "If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall shine, rise in darkness, and your gloom will be like the noonday." Wow. The prophet Isaiah is saying, what we celebrate at the altar must be lived in our homes. In other words, we cannot be split personalities, one person in the church and another person outside. Angels in the church, but devils outside. We have to be the light. If having experienced the light of Jesus through our church celebrations and ceremonies, we manifest it when we are outside. Then, as he says, your light will shine in the dark, and your night will be like the noonday. Or as Jesus reminds us, you are the light of the world. Pope Paul VI, in writing one of his documents, has these beautiful words. He says, the world listens more willingly to witnesses than to teachers. And if at all it listens to teachers, it is because they are witnesses. And I would add, witnesses to the light. You know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to take a page of history that goes back to the early church. You know, when early church lived under persecution, then finally Emperor Constantine in the year 313 through the Edict of Milan made Christianity a legitimate religion. Now, as a result of that, the number of Christians began to grow. However, the rest of them were still in their former ways, following the Roman gods. And I just want to bring a sense of history and to see how the Christians of that time were the light to the world. I bring this as a record of the past in order to throw light on the present. So let me present a historical record of that time. As I said, the number of Christians began to grow only after 313. And as the Christians grew, in one sense, it was no different from their lives externally from their pagan neighbors. But their faith made all the difference in the world. You know, today when you go to Rome, you will see magnificent buildings of that time. But that were the buildings of the rich and of the political leaders. The poor people lived in small kinds of houses which were infested with rats and lice. Life expectancy was only about 30 years. There was a constant danger of fire suddenly engulfing your home. You know, the corpses of the dead were just thrown out near the city garbage dump or near the gutters. This was the everyday misery of ordinary Christians. And the Christians of the people of Rome and the Christians lived in that environment. Somehow, however, the Christian homes were a little different. And the difference was the means of evangelization, a means of giving witness. Why do I say that? Because, as St. Augustine said, it was one heart setting their heart on fire. The witness of their lives was, see how those Christians love one another. So the kind of ways that they were responding, particularly when there was an epidemic or a pandemic. Because when the epidemic, which was feared, was one of the biggest terrors of that time, just as it is today. The moment, because at that time the physicians knew that these diseases were so contagious. But they didn't have what we have today, antibiotics or medicines or antivirals to resist this. So once the diseases hit the land, there was really no stopping them. Strangely, some of the first to escape would have been the doctors, then the priests of the Roman guards, and even the ordinary families were encouraged to abandon these infected family members. But Christians were duty-bound to care for the sick. Consider this account from the year 260 AD. Most of our Christians showed unbounded love and loyalty, never sparing themselves and thinking only of one another. They took charge of the sick, attending their need, ministering to them in Christ. And when they departed, their life was serenely happy. Now, Christians were more probable to survive the epidemic because they cared for one another. What's more, the Christian families even cared for those who were not even Christian. So the unbaptized who received the care from Christians were more likely to survive and therefore to ask for baptism themselves. And this kind of response and behavior soon established a new kind of culture. Externally, the law, the government, and life around seemed to be the same, but inwardly, something had changed. The early Christians showed what it meant to be the light and to reflect the light who was Jesus. They witnessed to Jesus, the light. And down through these 2 millennia, the light continues to shine. What I now want to speak about is how this light can be weakened or even dimmed. Today, in some circles, you might hear this popular phrase or mantra, I'm spiritual, but not religious. Now, this can mean many things. At the risk of simplifying or oversimplifying, let me make a humble attempt. The thinking goes somewhat like this when you say, I'm spiritual, not religious. So, being religious in this kind of thinking means following some outdated rules and dogmas. Being religious means being part of organized religion like a church that has lost its credibility because of the hypocrisy of the leaders, the self-righteous pious people, and sadly, the scandals of abuse. This is indeed a painful blot on the church, and we can never repent enough about it. The church has become more alert, sensitive, particularly led by Pope Francis. In fact, on 20th August 2018, Pope Francis wrote a letter addressed to the people of God precisely on these matters and how we as church should respond, considering the terrible abuse in the church. We have a long way to go, and we must make this part to cleanse the church of the harm that has been caused by its ordained ministers. Now, to come back to the argument that some of them make, I'm spiritual, not religious. Because they say that religion is responsible for so much war and violence in the world. Yes, in one sense it is true. But there are millions of deaths also because of non-religious atheist people like Lenin and Stalin and Mao and so many others. Because in the last resort, it is not just about religion, but warped religion and ideology, and warped and twisted persons who use religion to peddle hate and violence. Being religious. Now, let me spend some time on what is probably understood by the term being spiritual. Because being spiritual, on the other hand, for those who profess this mantra, can mean I'm freed from all dogma, obligation, and practice, and free to be myself before God. Yes, I might skip Sunday Mass, but now and then I will dip into some religious service practices of my youth, maybe Mass at Christmas or Easter, or even have a church wedding to please my parents. Now, I am a good human being. I do no harm to anyone else, and that is so very true. They help the poor in need. Good people with goodwill, and there is no disputing that. But what they continue saying is, I find what works for me, and I don't want to commit to something that will be too confining. I find the moral codes too demanding. I follow my inner voice, and I choose to be spiritual on my own terms. Well, I'm sure God connects with people like these wherever they are. I'm sure there is so much of goodness, care, and concern in them for others. However, in spite of our best spiritual efforts, we are not perfect. We do make mistakes. And when we do, we need the wisdom of a religious tradition and the support and the challenge of a faith community, here, the church. To take an example, a young woman who's soon going to be a mother for the first time would say, I need no one. I can be a mother on my own terms. Or she could say, I can learn and benefit from a larger tradition. I can get the expertise of doctors and the experience of my own mother. My dear friends, the church as mother is concerned to share with her children the richness of a tradition spanning 2,000 years and more. The church, imperfect though its members are, was founded by Jesus himself and therefore offers a compass bigger than ourselves. And that is why we need a faith community, which is the church, to correct us and to connect with us. We need the church to enrich us and to correct our limited experience. But we also need the church so that we can connect with the larger body of Christ. Religion and Christianity is not just about being good persons and doing good, but being connected with Jesus. There is no such thing as a solo Christian. Jesus himself reminds us that we cannot be spiritual or Christian on our own and on our own terms. He says so clearly in John's Gospel, I am the vine, you are the branches. Remain with me, because apart from me you can do nothing. The sacraments are ways of being connected and strengthened with this life. Sacraments that are life-giving, like baptism and confirmation. And sacraments like Eucharist and confession, when well made, are truly life-giving. I know this for myself and from the experience of so many others who have been strengthened by these sacraments. So then, spiritual, not religious, not possible. We must be both spiritual and religious. Because we are spiritual, we are deeply religious. And when we are authentically religious, we will find our spirituality deepened. And this is how we will not only experience the light, we will be witnesses of this light to others. Jesus says to his disciples and to us, you are the light of the world. Now that's a scary thought, because sometimes we are not always the light. We find it hard to forgive ourselves, sometimes even forgive others. We don't always make good decisions and moral choices. We can sometimes choose to be petty, rude, mean, revengeful. And yet, Jesus trusts you and me to be his light, the light to the world. Now, I want you to understand this. As we listen to Jesus' words, we not only hear an expectation or obligation, we also hear a blessing and a promise that this light does not have to burn on its own. God has placed a spirit within us, who dwells within us, who enlightens us and will never leave us. The Spirit blesses us with the light that takes away our blindness and the darkness and indifference to the suffering of those around. The Spirit blesses us and enables us to have a heart willing to embrace others, beyond our little circle, beyond our little ghetto, beyond our petty life. The Spirit of God blesses us and opens our eyes, broadens our vision, so that truly we can carry the light of Jesus and be the light of the world. I have been graced and privileged by so many people God has brought into my life, who by the witness of their life have shown me what it means to be the light of Jesus to the world. They have shown this by their commitment and their dedication, not just to people in the church, but to all broken people. They have shown this by their dedication and commitment, not just to people of faith, but people of other faiths and even of no faith. They have shown this by a perseverance in spite of so much opposition, to continue being the light, never looking for recognition for themselves. Sometimes you get a lot of people who will do many things because of the name, the fame, the title, the recognition they get. It's all to their glory. But people like these reflect Jesus, the light. They march to the beat of Jesus' drum, not to public acclaim or recognition, because they know their reward will be great in heaven. And therefore, we turn to this icon of light. I began with Mary being the one who points to Jesus with the star and with her hand, Jesus as the light, the way, the truth, and the life. She, with her hands, proclaimed, "Do whatever he tells you." But it's not enough merely to experience the light. It's important for us to be the light, his light, to the world. I now invite you to turn a contemplative gaze to this icon of light. Just look gently at the icon and allow the icon to look kindly upon you. Ask yourself, in all these days of reflection, how has my relationship with Mary, my mother, deepened? How have I allowed her to inspire me and to guide me to Jesus the light? How have I responded to her as she gently leads me to the heart of Jesus? How seriously have I reflected on her, pointing Jesus to me, saying, "Do whatever he tells you." Let the icon keep looking at you as you search these questions in your heart. How do people see me? A kind, caring, compassionate, forgiving person? Do I truly reflect Jesus the light? Or do people see me as aggressive, harsh, unrepentant, vindictive, despite all my religiosity? Do I dispel the darkness, or do I add to it? How much of Jesus the light do I reflect? Sense the presence of Jesus and Mary gently embracing you. Sense the assurance of this presence of Jesus and Mary telling you you are not alone. Let these Novena days be an experience that deepens your faith, strengthens your hope, envelops you in love. And don't forget, she is our mother of perpetual help, the mother of Jesus. And yes, your mother and mine.